My next guest is a motivational speaker and host of Catholic Connection each morning on EWTN Radio. She's here to talk about her new book with a timely title, Conquering Coronavirus, How Faith Can Put Your Fears to Rest. Please welcome Teresa Tomeo back to the show. Teresa, you wrote this book in 4 days after speaking with priests about how they were ministering during the pandemic. What did they say that inspired this book?
Well, they told me, Raymond, that they still wanted to minister to their people no matter what the restrictions. And they were so creative in so many of the ways that they did that. And I thought, wow, I want people to remember these stories. I want them to be inspired and to know that God, through his ministers, is still with us despite our circumstances. So that really inspired me. So I started collecting the stories. And then I also had a very powerful experience because of the passing of my mother back in March, right as the shutdown started here in Michigan. She didn't die of COVID, but she died of natural causes, but still not being able to give her the funeral liturgy, have a, really what we would consider a beautiful burial. It was a simple Christian graveside service. That was very eye-opening to me, and I learned a lot and I grew a lot, and I wanted to share that with other people. So it literally poured out of me, the book did, after my mom's passing in mid-March.
So your mother, Rosie, they didn't even have a private mass for the family?
Well, we were just starting to shut down here in Michigan, and my wonderful pastor really just tried to do whatever he could, but the rules kept changing momentarily. Remember, in the beginning of all this, everyone was just basically flying by the seat of their pants trying to figure out what was going on. And at first, we did have a mass schedule, but then literally overnight, by the time we were getting ready to have that funeral mass, the rules changed. So we ended up having a very small wake with just, 10 of us at the funeral home. And then we went over to the cemetery for the Christian committal, the graveside service. But I'm confident that we're opening up again here in Michigan. As a matter of fact, this week we have masses now. This weekend we'll be having masses again. And for me, being able to eventually have that mass, I think will be beautiful. And my pastor has also said we'll still live stream it so all my Italian relatives in Jersey and around the country can join us. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's nice. Now, you relate the pandemic we're facing today to the attacks on 9/11, when the country saw an outpouring of faith. The virus has impacted the number of people praying in the United States. According to a Pew poll in late March, praying during COVID-19, more than half of all U.S. adults, 55%, say they have prayed for an end to the spread of the virus. That'll get their attention. So have some 15% who say they seldom or never pray, and 24% of people who say they do not belong to any religion. Now, people are open to pray, particularly, I think, because they're in desperate straits. Do you think it'll continue once the pandemic is over? Remember, mass attendance went up and then it came back down after 9/11. Is there a danger that some of these dioceses or parishes will not survive?
Well, I think there is definitely a danger of that. And that's one of the other reasons I wrote the book, because I don't want us to forget what happened after 9/11. And I'm not just talking about the horrific acts themselves. Obviously, we'll never forget that. But as you said, the numbers went up, then they went down again. And we have this interest right now. It's still out there because there's still so many unknowns depending on the fallout of the pandemic. But I do think that we're set up differently than we were before, nearly 20 years ago. I think because of the situation of not being able to reach out to people in person through Mass and the sacraments and other events that we have at church, conferences, that we were forced to do things differently. And some of these, I think, events that we're doing online will keep people connected. And I think because so many had to go online with the masses, I think there's a renewed interest in actually seeing the Mass. Even faithful Catholics of whom I spoke and have told me that they're looking at the Mass or looking at their own parish differently. So I'm optimistic. But again, another reason I wrote the book is to remind people that we need to really take advantage of this opportunity in a good way and remind people of what's available to them in the faith. But if we let it go, we're missing a huge opportunity.
One of the chapters in your book is called Resurrecting Time-Tested Traditions, and it deals with bringing back the old norm, especially for families who now have time to eat together and pray together, look out for their neighbors and so on. How important is it to take that time and examine our lives and make permanent changes as we move back to that old norm?
I think it's huge, and the idea of the old norm actually was something that was preached in a homily by one of our associate pastors after we first started having online masses at our parish. And it struck me in my work in media awareness. And I remember years ago when you first had me on this program with my very first book, Noise, that was one of the very big themes that I had in the book, this real FaceTime with families together. You know, the Center for Addiction and Substance Abuse still says if they could get families to have dinner with their children uninterrupted by the media at least 2 or 3 times a week, they would see a huge decrease in the number of addicted teens, whether it be marijuana, whether it be alcohol, whatever the addiction or the substance abuse, because that real FaceTime is so important. And I think that's being rediscovered now. And so that's why I have the reflection questions at the end of each chapter to really help people think about this. And you know what? God is using this. He didn't cause this. He's allowing it to happen. Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. But we need to see the positives that are coming out of this and take advantage of them and build on them.
You point out that how we see this pandemic is important, as either an obstacle or an opportunity to deepen our relationship with God. How can we see this pandemic as an opportunity, Teresa?
Well, I think it's some of the items we were just talking about, where there's a renewed interest in prayer and faith, and more people are watching Mass and maybe rethinking they're being raised Catholic, maybe fallen away Catholics are coming back. For me, I know that there are a lot of people listening and talking to people who've lost their jobs. Well, I lost my job more than once in my secular media career, and it wasn't during a pandemic. It was just because that's the media. They change on-air personalities, as you and I well know, like they change ties and underwear. And every time something negative happened to me in my professional career, God used it as he may have closed a door, but he opened a huge picture window. And so I think this is an opportunity, as scary as it may be for some people, to really think, am I really following God's will in my life? Am I doing what God called me to do in terms of using my gifts and talents? When I was in the secular media, I was doing a fairly good job of being a reporter, but I wasn't really tapping into all those things the Lord wanted me to do with my communication skills. I was limiting myself to covering car crashes and fires. Let's be honest. That's what, the secular and local news media do. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. There's a reason they have that saying. So when I had that time in between those jobs, I really started to think and pray as I was making my way back to the church. And if I hadn't been fired or laid off, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. So there is always a silver lining. I'm not saying take a Pollyanna approach, but I'm saying if God is allowing this to happen, there are reasons for it. And let's go a little bit deeper and see what he wants to do this time that we have.
This book it's really a collection of stories illustrating how God works through everyday people and the small signs he offers to take us through difficult moments. As you mentioned, you have reflections at the end of each chapter. What do you hope people take away from this beyond this coronavirus thing? I mean, if you speak to some doctors who specialize in infectious disease, they believe this thing is cresting and burning out, and it may burn off the way MERS and SARS did.
It could, it very well may be, but I think 2 things. First, just because of the way, let's be honest, the secular media and certain politicians are handling this could be with us for a while, and we're going to be dealing with a lot of the economic fallout, not to mention the pain that people are going through in terms of the uncertainties and all of these other issues that you and I cover on our shows regularly. But I think for me, what I'm trying to get people to do, in addition to recognizing God in all things, is to, as we say in TV, pull out for the wide shot. So what does this mean? Okay, so please God, no other pandemic might not come along in our lifetime, but if we're still on this earth, we are going to suffer. God tells us that the rain falls on the just and the unjust. So how are we going to have, what is our reaction going to be? How are we going to respond to the next area of suffering in our lives in terms of hopefully this will equip us better to learn something from those negative experiences that we go through, whatever they may be. And again, please, we hope that nothing like this again. But at the same time, there's a reason for it. And I've always found that there's great growth to be had. And the Catholic Church is such an amazing teaching on suffering. There's great growth to be had and learned when you go through a tough time. I mean, I heard a Bible study teacher say once, a very long time ago, all sunshine makes a desert. We normally, not that we ask for suffering, nor do we want it, but we normally don't really learn all that much when everything is hunky-dory and we're going along just fine. It's when we have to struggle and we really have to dig more deeply that God teaches us some pretty profound and hopefully long-term lessons.
No, it's a moment to struggle for the things that matter. And I think we lose sight of that, particularly in the media, onslaught about this coronavirus. You know, I've spent a lot of time reading things I usually don't have time to read, like big biographies. I dove into the John Adams biography, the Hamilton, the Washington biographies. That revolutionary period, they were riddled with yellow fever, which Alexander Hamilton got, smallpox, which half of Washington's army contracted. These people were fighting an invading army and smallpox, but the focus of liberty, human freedom, their rights that were given to them by God that they wanted to defend, that was paramount and worth the struggle. And I think we've got to kind of shake ourselves out of this. We've got it pretty easy. I mean, you can call up food and you can watch Netflix all day. We need to get the fight back, and I think that includes for your faith. So thanks for reminding us of the things that matter, Teresa. Conquering
I really
coronavirus. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really think you made some great points, just wrapping up. Personal freedom and religious freedoms, they can be taken away from us so quickly, and especially here in our state of Michigan. We have people from all political persuasions that are showing up in our state capitol over and over again because they're fed up and they feel like they are being trampled on. But I think it's an awakening. I think people are recognizing, as you just said, that we have some pretty good foundations in this country that we don't want to lose. So I'm hoping that the book wakes us all up, including myself. I've learned a lot through these last few months, and there are lessons I think that I'll never forget.
It's a great read. Conquering Coronavirus, How Faith Can Put Your Fears to Rest by Teresa Tomeo. It's available at bookstores everywhere and online and through EWTN's religious catalog at EWTNRC.com. Teresa, thank you. Stay safe.
Thanks, Raymond. God bless.